Okay, today we're looking at lesson 4.3b. We're solving quadratic equations by factoring. Today we are going to start objective number 2, solve quadratic equations by factoring. This all ties in with our objective A2, A1, A2, A2, 1 right there. Okay, first thing that we've got to look at is something called the zero product property. Basically, when we are multiplying two numbers together and we get an answer of 0, we know that one of the two numbers, either this one or this one, has to be 0. All right, that's the zero product property. Now, when we look at a polynomial, such as this one right here, okay, we know that since they multiply together to give us 0, either x plus 3 has to be 0, or x minus 5 has to be 0. So in this case, if x plus 3 equals 0, that would mean that x would have to be negative 3. Because if x is negative 3, that would make this 0 times negative 8 equals 0. Now, on the other hand, if this one right here, if x were equal to 5, then what we would have is 8 times 0 equals 0. So that's called the zero product property, and we're going to be using that to solve polynomials by factoring. Now, when we take a look at how the textbook shows this, all right, that's fine right there. Notice on this polynomial right here, we only have two terms. So step one, what we need to do when we have two terms, we always want to look for the greatest common factor of the two numbers. We have 16x squared, and we have 8x. Now, the prime factorization for 16x squared is 2 times 8, which is 2 times 4, which is 2 times 2. That's the prime factorization. And then we have x squared. 8x is 2 times 4, and 4 is 2 times 2, and we have an x there as well. Now, our greatest common factor then would be the things that they have in common. A 2, a 2, another 2, and an x. So our greatest common factor is going to be 2 times 2 times 2 times x. In other words, 8x. Now, we're going to use that greatest common factor to factor out of this polynomial right here. Okay, so 8x, we're going to take 16x squared, and we're going to divide it by 8x. 16 divided by 8 is 2. X squared divided by x is x. Next, we're going to factor out the 8x out of this 8x. Notice that's plus 8x, so I need a plus here. And 8x divided by 8x is 1. Now, this is equal to 0. So what we know is that either 8x has to equal 0 or 2x plus 1 has to equal 0. Now, if 8x equals 0, then x would equal 0 because 8 times 0 equals 0. There's one solution. On the other hand, if 2x plus 1 equals 0, then subtract 1 from both sides. 2x equals negative 1. Divide both sides by 2. X equals negative 1/2. So our two solutions for this equation are 0 and negative 1/2. Okay, now that's very simple. They'll factor out the greatest common factor. There's only two terms. They have a greatest common factor. Always look for your greatest common factor before you do anything else. And now let's move on to this one right here. This is from your exercise number 1. We'll start off with 6x squared and 2x. We'll look for our greatest common factor. 6x squared is equal to 2 times 3 times x times x. 2x is simply 2 times x. Our greatest common factor would be 2x. That's what we're going to factor out of these polynomials right here. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take a 2x out of 6x squared. 6 divided by 2 is 3, and x squared divided by x is x. Next, notice we have a negative divided by a positive. Fix this real quick. There we go. Put it back together. Excellent. Okay, where was I? Okay, so we have a negative divided by a positive, and that will give us a negative. And we have 2x divided by 2x, and that's going to equal 1. So, using the fact that we just did a minute ago, we know that either 2x, either 2x equals 0, or we know that 3x minus 1 equals 0. And I don't know where that 2 came from up there. Please excuse me. Rusty is there. We'll put that 0 back up there where it should be. Excellent. Okay. All right. So 2x equals 0 means that x would have to equal 0. 3x minus 1. Let's add 1 to both sides. 3x would have to equal 1. Let's divide both sides by 3. X would have to equal 1/3. Here are your two solutions. Okay, now let's move on to trinomials such as x squared plus 9x plus 20 equals 0. If we take a look in the textbook, these are the steps that they have you go through. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a new method that is a little bit easier, I think, and it carries over into tomorrow's lesson. This is called the box method. All right, step 1. We are going to create a box. We're going to divide that box into 4 equal parts. All right? Now, this first term, x squared, goes right here into this first box right here. So we're going to place an x squared right here. Our last term, 20, will go into this corner. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply a 20 times the x squared. That's going to give me 20x squared. Alright? Next, what I need to do is I now need to think of two numbers, and I'm just looking basically right here times at the 20. I need to think of two numbers that multiply to give me 20, while at the same time add to give me 9. Now, think about this. 1 times 20 is 20. Positive 1 times 20 and negative 1, positive 20, negative 1. So positive 1 times positive 20 equals 20. And also negative 1 times negative 20 equals 20. However, they do not add to give me 9. So it's not going to be that set of numbers. Let's think of another set of numbers that multiply to give us 20. How about 4 and 5? A positive 4 times a positive 5 will give me 20, and they will add to give me 9. So the numbers that I'm going to be using here are 4 and 5. Okay, I'm going to place those in this box and that box, and it doesn't matter which box I place them in. I want to go ahead and put an X with those as well. So I'm just going to put my 4x right here and my 5x right there. Once you have the box set up now, that's pretty simple. We're simply going to take and look at these top two numbers and factor a greatest common factor out of both of those. Okay, x squared and 4x have in common an x. Next step, let's take this and divide it by this and place our answer up here. X squared divided by x is x. Now that we've done that, now we can go over here and let's take a look at this one, 5x. Let's divide this 5x by this x. 5x divided by x equals 5. And last but not least, Let's take this 4x and divide it by this x and place our answer here. 4x divided by x equals 4. Now what we've got is the two binomials that would multiply to give us this. So I've got x plus 5, that's a positive 5, times x plus 4, and that's a positive 4, equals 0. Now if I take the time to go ahead and FOIL this out, let's just do that real quick. That's going to be x squared plus 4x plus 5x plus 20 equals 0. So x squared plus 9x plus 20 equals 0. And you can see from that what we got, this right here, this equation, and this equation are the same. So we know that we factored it correctly. Now let me clean all this up. And we're going to take a look now at the solutions. Okay, from the previous example, we know that if this number times this number equals 0, then either x plus 5 would have to be 0, meaning that x would have to equal negative 5, because negative 5 plus 5 is 0, negative 5 plus 4 is negative 1, that's 0 times negative 1 equals 0. On the other hand, if this one equals 0, x would have to equal negative 4. That would mean that negative 4 plus 5 is 1, negative 4 plus 4 is 0, 1 times 0 is 0. So you can see that now we have our two solutions. Okay, that's called the box method. We'll look at it one more time here from your exercise 4. Step 1, create a box. Place the first term in row 1, column 1. Place the last term in row 2, column 2. Now, multiply the two terms together, and we've got negative 30x squared. We want to look just at the number right there and think of numbers that multiply to give us negative 30 while they still add to give us the coefficient of that, which is 1. Okay, I've got a positive 1 times a negative 30, but they do not add to give us negative 1. I've got a negative 1 and a positive 30. They don't add to give us 1 either. So it's not 1 and 30. 2 times 15. Okay, a positive 2 and a negative 15, their difference would be 13. A negative 2, or negative 13 rather. The negative 2 and a positive 15 would be positive 13. We're still looking for a 1. It's not that. 3 times 10. Positive 3, negative 10, their difference is 7. Remember, we are still looking to find a difference of 1. And I know that that would be a negative 7 if I went the other way. Okay, so 4 won't go into 30, but 5 will. 5 and 6. Okay, a positive 5 and a negative 6. They have a difference of positive 1. I'm sorry, negative 1, and I'm looking for a positive 1. So I know it's going to be negative 5 and positive 6. Because when I add those two together, I get positive 1. So now then, I'm going to take and place those numbers, and it doesn't matter where I put it. I'll put a negative 5x here. I'll put a positive 6x here. I could switch them around. This method would work either way. Okay, now for the factoring. X squared and negative 5x have in common an x. Now, let's go up to this place right up here. X squared divided by x equals x. Okay, now we're going to jump down to the bottom, and we're going to work with this number right here. 6x divided by x is 6. That's a positive 6. And last but not least, we're going to take and we'll come up with this number right here. Negative 5x divided by x is a negative 5. So what we have here are the top, x minus 5, and the side, x plus 6 equals 0. Now, if x plus 5 equals 0, x would have to be, sorry, if x minus 5 equals 0, x would have to be 5. If x plus 6 equals 0, x would have to be negative 6. These are your two solutions. You can always check these solutions by running them back through the original equation. If I plug in a 5 into this equation right here, then what I'm going to have is 5 squared plus 5 minus 30 equals 0. In other words, 25 plus 5 minus 30 equals 0. And you can see that will give us 0 equals 0, a true statement. That means that 5 is a solution. And then I can check the negative 6. Negative 6 squared plus negative 6 minus 30 equals 0. Negative 6 squared is 36, plus negative 6 equals minus 6, then minus 30 equals 0. 36 minus 6 is 30, 30 minus 30 is 0. Another true statement, meaning that this is a solution. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is lesson 4.3b.